Being a horror buff, I had been waiting for this movie for months, so yeah, I was super excited that night. I had just picked up early tickets for Evil Dead Burn, but the moment I walked out of that theater, Hey, my name's Jay, I'm 24, and what I'm about to tell you happened just a few nights ago. I'm not exaggerating anything, and I'm definitely not trying to convince anyone of anything. Honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. Before I get into it, I want to clear one thing up because I already know what some people are probably going to think. This isn't one of those stories where I'm saying a movie is cursed or haunted or anything like that. I don't believe that. At least, I really want to believe that. I'm just telling you exactly how everything happened because the timing of it all still messes with my head. I've always been a huge horror fan, not the kind of person who watches one scary movie around Halloween. I mean, I genuinely love horror. Growing up, I'd watch pretty much anything I could get my hands on. Slashers, supernatural stuff, psychological horror. I was into all of it. The Evil Dead movies have always been some of my favorites. The original has this raw, creepy atmosphere that I still love. And the 2013 remake is honestly one of my favorite horror remakes ever. I must have watched it more times than I can count. I'm also a big Friday the 13th fan, and The Conjuring 2 is probably one of my favorite haunted house movies. Basically, if a horror movie gets decent reviews, chances are I'm already planning to watch it. So when the trailers for Evil Dead Burn started dropping, I was immediately interested. Every new trailer looked better than the last one. Then people who had gone to early screenings started posting online saying it was actually really good. That just made me want to see it even more. Advance tickets had finally gone on sale, and I'd already decided I wanted to watch it opening weekend. I live in Houston with my mom. It's just the two of us now. My dad passed away a few years ago, and ever since then we've kind of leaned on each other. Losing him hit both of us pretty hard. Some days are easier than others, but there isn't really a day that goes by where we don't think about him at least once. My mom's one of those people who always tries to act stronger than she actually feels. Even when she's having a rough day, she'll still ask me how mine was first, before talking about herself. We're really close. At the time this happened, I'd recently finished college and was waiting for graduation while sending out job applications. So my schedule was pretty relaxed. I'd help my mom around the house, apply for jobs during the day, and most evenings I'd either stay home or hang out with a couple of close friends. One of them is my friend Jordan. I've known him for years. That night I was over at his apartment. We ordered burgers, had a basketball game playing in the background, and spent most of the evening talking instead of actually watching it. Jordan had gone through a breakup not too long before that, so most of the conversation somehow ended up being about relationships, dating, whether moving in together too early is a terrible idea, and all the random late-night conversations guys end up having when nobody's really paying attention to the time. At one point, we somehow switched from talking about his ex to horror movies. I remember telling him I couldn't wait for Evil Dead Burn to come out. He laughed and said I was probably the only person he knew who actually got excited every time a new horror movie was announced. Honestly, he wasn't wrong. By the time I finally left his apartment, it was already getting pretty late. The roads weren't empty, but traffic had died down quite a bit compared to earlier in the evening. On the drive home, I remembered the theater wasn't far from where I was. Since advance tickets had just gone on sale, I figured I'd stop there for a few minutes and grab them instead of waiting until the weekend. I know most people just book online these days, but I was already close, and I actually liked the idea of walking out with the tickets in my hand. It wasn't some big decision, it was one of those completely ordinary things you do without thinking twice. If I had known what was about to happen, I would have driven straight home that night. I got to the theater a little after 10:30. It was one of the AMC theaters here in Houston. There were still plenty of cars outside because a couple of late-night movies had just started, but compared to earlier in the evening, the place had definitely quieted down. I parked in one of the outer rows of the parking garage and walked inside. The lobby still had people scattered around. A few couples were buying popcorn, a group of teenagers was arguing over what movie to watch, and somebody had just walked out carrying one of those huge collectible popcorn buckets. It all felt completely normal. I walked up to the box office. The guy working there looked about my age. He smiled and asked, "What can I get you? Can I get 2 tickets for opening night of Evil Dead Burn?" He laughed. "You're getting in at the right time. Those opening weekend shows have been filling up pretty fast." I smiled. "Yeah, I've been waiting for this one for months." As he was pulling it up on his screen, he looked back at me and said, "You watch all the Evil Dead movies?" "Pretty much." He nodded. I liked Rise, but I don't know. It didn't really hit the same for me. This new one actually looks better. "I know exactly what you mean," I said. "Rise was good, but yeah, this one looks really mean, bro." He laughed and nodded like he knew what I meant. A few seconds later, the printer started making that little clicking sound. He grabbed the 2 tickets, slid them across the counter and said, "Enjoy it, man." I thanked him, folded the tickets carefully, and slipped them into my wallet. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the second one was for Jordan. Unfortunately, I didn't have a girlfriend back then, so Jordan was probably going to be the one grabbing my arm during the scary parts. Looking back, that was probably the last completely normal moment I had. The second those theater doors closed behind me, something about the night felt off. I can't explain it any better than that. Nothing looked or sounded different. It was just one of those feelings you get for absolutely no reason. The walk back toward the parking garage wasn't very long, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. Most of the people who had been outside earlier were already inside their movies. The sidewalks had emptied out. The only sounds left were a few cars passing on the main road somewhere in the distance and the humming of the parking garage lights. I remember putting my hands in my pockets and thinking about where Jordan and I were going to sit the following weekend. I was actually in a really good mood. Then, for whatever reason, I looked down. You know how, when you're walking under streetlights at night, your shadow stretches out in front of you. That's what caught my attention, except mine didn't look right. It looked wider than it should have, almost like somebody was walking so close behind me that our shadows were blending together into one bigger shadow. I frowned for a second, looked back over my shoulder. Nobody. I even looked around a little. Nothing. I just shook my head. Probably just the angle of the light, I remember thinking. I kept walking. About 30 or 40 seconds later, I went under another streetlight. This time, I didn't even mean to look down. My eyes just did. The second shadow was back. Only now, it wasn't blending with mine anymore. It was its own shadow. I stopped. It stopped too. I just stood there, staring at the ground. The shape didn't look like mine. It looked slimmer. And what really got to me was the head. It honestly looked like someone with shoulder-length hair. The first thing that popped into my head was, that looks like a woman's shadow. I don't know why. It just did. I kept staring at it for another second. Then, without me taking another step, the shadow slowly started moving toward me. Just one step. That's all it took. I completely froze. Every hair on my arms stood up. I spun around so fast I almost lost my balance. Nobody, not behind me, not across the sidewalk, not anywhere. At that point, my heart was pounding. I wasn't trying to figure it out anymore. I just wanted to get back to my car. I started walking fast, not running exactly, but close enough. I looked down one last time. There was only my shadow, nothing else. I unlocked my car almost immediately, jumped inside, locked the doors without even thinking about it, and just sat there gripping the steering wheel. "Relax, Jay." I remember saying it out loud. Seriously, relax. I took a deep breath. Come on, man. Get it together. It's just in your head. I sat there another few seconds before finally starting the engine. As I pulled out of the parking garage and headed home, the feeling came back. Not the feeling that someone was following me, something different. It honestly felt like somebody else was in the car with me. I couldn't tell where exactly. I just knew it felt like I wasn't alone anymore. The car suddenly felt smaller, heavier. I even turned the radio off because I caught myself listening, like I expected to hear somebody breathing. I didn't. The rest of the drive was completely uneventful, but by the time I pulled into my driveway, I wasn't thinking about Evil Dead Burn anymore. 5 minutes earlier, I couldn't stop thinking about finally watching that movie. Now, the movie was the last thing on my mind. I just wanted to get inside my house. I pulled into the driveway, turned the engine off, grabbed my wallet, and got out of the car. I didn't want to sit in there any longer than I had to. The second I locked the car, I started walking toward the house. After a few steps, when I was about halfway to the front door, I turned around. I don't even know why. Maybe because of what had happened outside the theater. Maybe because that feeling still hadn't left me. I just stood there for a second, looking toward the street. Nothing. No people. No movement. No strange shadow. Just a couple of porch lights from the houses across the street and the occasional car passing somewhere in the distance. I shook my head. Relax. There's nobody behind you. Then I headed inside. My mom was still awake. She was sitting on the couch with the TV on, although I don't think she was really watching it. She looked up the second I walked in. "There you are," she said. "Where were you? I was about to call you." "Sorry," I said. "I was over at Jordan's, and on the way back I stopped by the theater." "The theater?" "Yeah. Advance tickets for Evil Dead Burn finally went on sale." She smiled and shook her head. "You and your horror movies," I laughed. "I know." "You already ate?" "Yeah. Jordan and I grabbed burgers." "All right, don't stay up too late." "I won't." I told her goodnight and went to my room. I looked at the tickets one more time, tossed them into my desk drawer, changed for bed, and lay down. For a minute, that weird shadow crossed my mind again. Then I sighed. "Come on, dude. You've been watching way too many horror movies." I rolled over, grabbed my phone, and texted Jordan. "Yo, loser. Keep July 10th free. I already got our Evil Dead Burn tickets, so don't even think about bailing on me." A few seconds later, he replied, Yeah, man. Whatever." I laughed, put my phone on the nightstand, rolled over a couple more times, and eventually drifted off. The next morning, I woke up a little later than usual. My mom was already up. I made some coffee, helped her clean up the kitchen, took the trash out, and spent part of the morning sending out a few more job applications. While checking my email, I noticed one company had finally replied to an application I'd sent the previous week. It was a rejection, just one of those generic emails thanking me for applying and letting me know they'd decided to move forward with another candidate. I sighed, closed the email, and moved on. That was just part of looking for a job. The rest of the day was completely normal. I helped my mom make dinner, wasted a little time watching YouTube, scrolled through my phone for a while, and before I knew it, it was nighttime again. Honestly, I thought everything was back to normal, but then, somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up because I thought I heard something. At first, I didn't even open my eyes all the way. You know that feeling when you're not completely awake yet? You're just lying there, wondering if you actually heard something or if your brain is still halfway inside a dream. I reached over, picked up my phone, and checked the time. It was around 3:30 a.m. I stared at the screen for a second, put it back on the nightstand, rolled over, and closed my eyes again. I figured it was probably nothing. Then I heard it again. A soft, scraping sound. Not loud, just enough to make me open my eyes again. I stayed where I was for another few seconds. Silence. Then, scrape. This time it sounded a little clearer, not louder, just closer. I remember letting out a quiet sigh. I honestly thought maybe my mom had gotten up for some water or something had shifted in the kitchen. Nothing about it seemed unusual. It was just enough to make me curious, so I got up and stepped into the hallway. The whole house was quiet, the kind of quiet every house has in the middle of the night. I stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. I almost turned around and went back to bed. Then I heard it again, definitely the kitchen. I started walking toward it. The kitchen lights were off. The only light was a faint glow coming through the window above the sink. It wasn't bright enough to light up the whole kitchen, just enough that I could make out the cabinets, the refrigerator, and the countertop. I took a couple more steps. Everything looked normal. Then I happened to look up, and I froze. There was something sitting on top of the kitchen cabinets. It didn't move. It was just there. At first, I couldn't even make out what I was looking at, just this huge black shape against the ceiling. As my eyes adjusted, I started making out its outline. It was crouched, with its knees pulled up close to its chest. Its arms looked too long, hanging in a way that made the whole shape look wrong. The posture reminded me of a frog right before it jumps. I couldn't see a face, just this dark silhouette sitting perfectly still. And I'm not gonna lie, I was scared shitless. The kitchen light switch was right beside me. Without taking my eyes off it, I reached over and turned the light on. The kitchen lit up instantly. Nothing. The cabinets were completely empty. I stepped a little closer and looked up. There wasn't anything there. I remember whispering, "What the hell?" I rubbed my eyes and looked again. Still nothing. For a few seconds, I just stood there trying to calm down. Then I turned the light back off. The kitchen dropped into darkness again, and it was back. Exact same spot. Same crouched shape. Same long arms. Like it had never disappeared. That was the moment I really started freaking out. I hit the light switch again. The lights came back on. Nothing. Empty cabinets. I stood there breathing hard, staring at that empty space. Then, for some stupid reason, I turned the light off one more time. This time, nothing. The cabinet was empty. Whatever I had seen was gone. I turned the kitchen light back on and left it on. I didn't even care. I just needed that room to stay bright. Then I went straight back to my room, got into bed, and pulled the blanket up higher than usual. I know that sounds childish, but in that moment, I just needed to feel covered. I lay there staring at the ceiling for a long time. Eventually, I got tired enough that I drifted back to sleep. The next day was normal. I slept in a little, had coffee with my mom, ran a couple of errands for her, and spent some time applying to a few more jobs. By evening, I was tired enough that I didn't even feel like going out. Jordan texted me, asking if I wanted to grab food, but I told him I was staying in. I watched some random YouTube videos, scrolled through my phone for a while, and went to bed sometime after 1. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I felt something brush against my foot. At first, I didn't fully wake up. I just moved my foot a little and tried to stay asleep. Then I felt it again. This light, ticklish feeling across my toes, like something had touched them. That woke me up. I pulled the blanket back and brought my foot closer. My toes looked a little wet. I touched them, then rubbed my fingers together. It wasn't like water. It felt thicker than that, almost sticky, almost like saliva. Oh damn, gross. I even smelled my fingers. Nothing, which somehow made it even weirder. For a second, I just sat there staring at my foot like an idiot. Then my brain went straight to the most normal explanation. A bug, maybe some insect had crawled across my foot, or maybe something had gotten caught in the blanket. I turned on the bedside lamp and checked the bed properly. Nothing. I lifted the blanket and gave it a few hard shakes. Still nothing. No bug. Nothing that made sense. I wiped my toes on the blanket because, honestly, I didn't know what else to do. Then I sat there for a minute, just looking at the end of the bed. I wasn't screaming or anything. I wasn't about to run into my mom's room and wake her up because my toes seemed wet. But yeah, I was freaked out. After a while, I turned the lamp off and lay back down. I kept my feet pulled a little closer than usual, which probably looked stupid, but I didn't care. It took me a long time to fall asleep again. Eventually, I did. The next day actually turned out to be pretty good. Jordan came over sometime after lunch, carrying a bag of burgers and acting like he'd already seen Evil Dead burn, even though he hadn't. Dude, I'm telling you, this one's gonna be insane. I laughed. You say that about every horror movie. Yeah, because they usually are. For you, maybe. He rolled his eyes. Man, you're impossible. We ended up spending a couple of hours together, watching random YouTube videos, arguing over which Evil Dead movie was the best, and roasting each other's terrible movie opinions. Before he left, he pointed at me and said, "And don't even think about bailing on me next Friday." I held up both hands. I'm not the one who's gonna chicken out. Good. Because if you do, I'm keeping your ticket. I laughed. Yeah, okay, loser, get out. He flipped me off on his way to the door. That was Jordan. We'd been friends long enough that half our conversations sounded like insults. After he left, the house went back to being quiet. Mom and I ordered Chinese that night. Nothing fancy, just one of those little traditions we'd picked up after Dad passed away. Whenever neither of us felt like cooking, we'd order food, put on some old sitcom she'd watched 100 times, and just hang out. She laughed at jokes before they happened because she'd memorized every episode. I kept giving her a hard time for it. She told me to stop talking and finish my food. I told her she was ruining the surprise for me. She just laughed. It felt normal. Around 1 in the morning, I headed to my room. I scrolled through my phone for a while before eventually falling asleep. I don't know how much later it was when I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door. Knock. 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 I opened my eyes. Yeah, it's me, honey. Mom, come in. The door opened slowly. The room was still pretty dark. The only light came through the blinds from outside. I couldn't really make out her face, just her outline. Her hair was down, and she was wearing the same pale blue nightgown she always wore around the house. She walked in and sat down on the little couch, which was right across from my bedroom door. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said softly. "I just couldn't sleep." I smiled. "Guess we're both having one of those weeks." "Looks like it." For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. She looked over at me. "You've been kind of quiet lately." I shrugged. "I'm all right." That little made me laugh. "What?" "I've known you for 24 years. You forget that sometimes." "I know exactly what your 'I'm all right' sounds like. I really am." She smiled. "Your dad used to say the exact same thing." I looked down and laughed. "Seriously?" "Every single time. I'm all right. And he never fooled me either." I shook my head. I guess I got that from him. You definitely did. A quiet silence settled over the room. Not awkward, just comfortable. Then she looked at me again. You know you're my whole world, right? I smiled. I know. I'm serious. Ever since your dad passed away, it's just been you and me. I know I probably check on you too much. I know I probably ask where you're going, when you'll be back, whether you've eaten. She laughed softly. I can be annoying. I smiled. A little. See? I knew it. But that's only because... She paused for a second. You're all I've got. I didn't even know what to say to that. So I just smiled and said, I'm not going anywhere, Mom. She shook her head a little. That's what you say now. One day you'll find some girl, move out with her, and then I'll only see you when you need something. I laughed. Mom, I'm not moving out and leaving you alone. You say that now. No, seriously. If I ever find someone, she's coming here. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Yeah. She's gonna have to live with both of us. Mom laughed. Poor girl. I grinned. She'll survive. She shook her head again. I don't know. A few months later, she'll probably look at you and say, Jay, either your mom goes or I do. I looked at her for a second. Then I laughed. Come on, Mom. You know that's never gonna happen. What's gotten into you? I'd never let that happen. She smiled. I know. I was just messing with you. I pointed at her. Yeah, well, don't do that. She laughed again. Okay. A few quiet seconds passed before she spoke again. Do you remember when you were about 8? And you had that really bad fever? I nodded. Barely. Your dad didn't sleep the entire night. He must have checked on you 20 times. I kept telling him, he's sleeping. Leave the poor kid alone. But every half hour, he'd quietly open your bedroom door just to make sure you were okay. I couldn't help smiling. I remember pretending to stay asleep. She laughed. Oh, he knew. He always knew. Another small silence filled the room. Then I quietly said, I still miss him. She nodded. So do I. Sometimes. I still catch myself thinking I heard his car pulling into the driveway. She didn't answer. She just looked at me for a moment, then gave a small nod. I know. And for a little while, neither of us said anything at all. That was one of the first real and emotional talks we'd had in a long time. It felt really good. Then, I heard something. A soft little sound from somewhere down the hallway, almost like something had lightly bumped into wood. I looked toward the bedroom door. You hear that? Mom turned her head toward the door. I think I did. We both listened. A few seconds passed. Then it happened again. Somewhere near the kitchen, I started getting off the bed. Relax, honey. It's probably just the house. Mom, wait here. Let me go check. She looked at me for a second. You want me to come with you? I shook my head. Nah, I'm good. I'll be right back. All right. But don't take too long. I won't. I left my bedroom door open and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark and quiet. I walked slowly toward the kitchen. As I got closer, I noticed this faint glow coming from inside. For a second, I thought maybe Mom had left a light on. Then I realized it wasn't the kitchen light. The refrigerator door was open. The light spilling out from inside was lighting up part of the kitchen, and standing in front of it was my mom in the same pale blue nightgown. Her back was toward me. She was reaching into the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water. I just stood there for a second. Mom? She turned around. Oh, I'm sorry, honey. Did I wake you up? My water bottle was empty, so I just came to grab another one. She gave me a puzzled look. Why are you still awake? I couldn't answer. I just kept staring at her. Honey, you all right? I finally managed to get a few words out. Weren't you? I stopped. She frowned. Weren't I what? I just stared at her. My heart was pounding so hard I could actually hear it. No, this couldn't be happening. Without saying another word, I slowly took a couple of steps backward. Then I turned around and hurried back toward my room. The bedroom door was still open. The first thing I saw was the couch, empty, completely empty. I walked into the room anyway, turned the light on, looked around. Nobody. The room was exactly the way I'd left it. A couple of seconds later, Mom walked in behind me. Jay, I turned around. She was looking at me with this really confused expression. Honey, what's wrong? You okay? I couldn't answer. I was breathing so hard I didn't even realize it until she stepped closer. Hey, relax. It's okay. She rested a hand on my shoulder. What happened? I just shook my head. I couldn't even get the words out. She looked at me for another second, then gently placed the back of her hand against my forehead. You don't feel warm. Were you having a bad dream? I quickly shook my head. No, I'm fine. She gave me that look moms always give when they know you're not telling them something. You don't look fine. I looked away. What was I supposed to tell her? That I'd just been talking to her all this time while she was asleep in her room? She would have thought I'd completely lost it. So I just took a deep breath. It's nothing, Mom. I think I'm just really tired. She looked at me for another few seconds. I'm still getting you something. She stepped out of the room and came back about a minute later with a glass of water and one of the mild sleeping pills her doctor had prescribed her a while back for nights when she couldn't sleep. She held them out to me. Here, take this. It'll help you calm down a little. I didn't argue. I took the pill, drank the water, and handed the glass back to her. She was about to leave when I stopped her. Mom. She turned around. Yeah, baby. I hesitated for a second. I know this probably sounds stupid, but can you just sit here with me for a little while? If you're not too sleepy. She smiled. Of course. She walked back over and sat down on the little couch. Then she looked at me and chuckled. Looks like all those horror movies finally got to my baby. I couldn't help smiling. Yeah, Mom, whatever. She laughed softly and shook her head. Close your eyes. You'll feel better after some sleep. I nodded, lay back down, and pulled the blanket over myself. Every now and then, I'd glance over at her. She was just sitting there quietly, scrolling through her phone every now and then, making sure I was okay. Somehow, just knowing she was there made me feel a little calmer. I don't remember exactly when I fell asleep. I just remember looking over at my mom one last time. She was still sitting on that couch, and somewhere between looking at her and closing my eyes, I dozed off. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't really slept. I just lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling. Then, everything from the night before came rushing back. I got up, washed my face, and walked into the kitchen. Mom was already making coffee. She looked over at me and smiled. Morning, baby. Morning. You look exhausted. I kinda am. She poured me a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. For a minute, we just stood there talking about random things. Then, as casually as I could, I asked, Hey, Mom. Last night, you only got up to get some water, right? She looked at me for a second. Yeah, I nodded. And before that? You didn't wake up or anything? She frowned. No. I slept straight through until I got thirsty. Why? I looked down at my coffee. Oh, nothing. I was just wondering. She gave me a curious look but didn't push it. Instead, she smiled and said, "Feeling any better now?" "Yeah, I think so." She reached over and lightly squeezed my shoulder. "Good." The conversation moved on to something else, but my mind never did. I never told her what had happened. What was I supposed to say? It didn't even make sense in my own head. A few days later, Jordan texted me, "Bro, early reviews of Evil Dead Burn look pretty dope." I looked at the message for a while before replying. "Yeah, looks like it." The strange thing was, I wasn't even excited anymore. A week earlier, I couldn't stop talking about that movie. Now I barely thought about it. I still can't make sense of everything that happened over those few days. Especially that night, having one of the most honest conversations with my mom in years, only to find out later that she'd never been there. Sometimes my mind wanders back to the same stupid thought. None of this had ever happened before. Everything started the night I bought those Evil Dead Burn tickets. Then I catch myself and think, come on, Jay. Don't be ridiculous. I've watched horror movies my whole life. I've watched every Evil Dead movie. Nothing like this had ever happened before. The movie couldn't have had anything to do with it. Or maybe it did.